What's going on, everyone? Lullet here. NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Today we're going to talk about exactly how to actually make your own NFT and get it ready to sell, and we'll be going over that step by step. We'll be starting this video off with what NFTs are at a high level, and if you already are in the know, then please feel free to fast forward accordingly with the timestamps below. With that, we'll get straight into it. Non-fungible is basically not having the ability to be able to be replaced by an identical item. So this Bitcoin over here is basically no different than this Bitcoin over here. And I'm not Andre Jig doing magic. There's two of these. So essentially, if you have Bitcoin or you have the US dollar or you have some currency, then basically one Bitcoin equals another Bitcoin, or one Bitcoin can be 100 million Satoshi, for example, or 100 US dollar bill can also be exchanged for 100 singles. The fact that it's non-fungible basically means that one of this NFT cannot be exchanged for another NFT. The way I like to think about it is that if you take the opposite of what an NFT is, for example, if you take the US dollar, then basically as long as a merchant is willing to accept this US dollar, it has value. And more than that, if there's a different country's currency, as long as you convert, let's say, the US dollars to that local currency, and as long as that merchant is willing to take it, then basically there's value, and that's the opposite of what an NFT is. Taking this example and flipping the script, now you have something, let's say, supremely unique, one of a kind. For example, the Mona Lisa. So if you have an NFT basically meant for the Mona Lisa, it's basically tokenizing the fact that it's unique, and there are details that are actually put into that specific NFT in terms of being, let's say, the first of its kind, the only of its kind in certain traits, certain properties. And so the tokenization process of why this is important is separate from how many Ether that's actually worth. For example, if you say the Mona Lisa is worth 1 million ETH, at the time of this recording, Ethereum is trading at around 2,000 USD per Ethereum, so $2,000 times a million is $2 billion. Taking this into consideration, the utility of NFTs comes into this picture like this. Let's say I make my own Mona Lisa, and let's say that I'm trying to sell mine, and let's assume that there's demand for the Mona Lisa. Now, we know that there's the original Mona Lisa, but let's say I made my own product called the Mona Lisa, looks the same in terms of the listing and everything around it. And let's say I price it at 999,999 ETH, basically 1 ETH less than a million, to attract buyers. Now what comes from this is that it seems that my Mona Lisa is 1 Ethereum cheaper, so might as well buy it. But reality is, which one's the original? And the fact that I'm pricing it 1 Ethereum cheaper, but mine's the original, then maybe it's a better option to go with my posting or listing of the Mona Lisa. The utility of NFTs comes from the information that exists for the underlying digital asset. So with the Mona Lisa, is mine the original or is mine a replica? In today's world, there's a lot of replicas compared to the actual originals, and that's its own industry of figuring out which one the original is. But through smart contracts, through the actual technology with NFTs, it's actually possible to know this through tracking the lineage and understanding the actual root from the get-go. Another trait of NFTs is that they're indivisible. For example, if you have $1 US and that equals 100 pennies, then basically with NFTs and the ones respective to our example of the Mona Lisa, you can't divide that actual uniqueness and ownership of it. It's going to be one-to-one in terms of a mapping. Do comment below if you want a deeper dive into NFTs, but the last point before we get into the step-by-step demo of actually how to sell an NFT is basically this. NFTs have an underlying digital asset, and so in the economy and the world we live in today, if you can create something infinitely, then basically you can make infinity of these digital assets, aka you'll have infinity NFTs. The issue with this that everyone's saying that NFT is in a bubble and in a phase is that with everything coming up the way it is, how do you know what's actually valuable versus what's not? There are certain industries, for example art, or for example music, where you have this unique creation made by a particular artist. And in today's world, in general, if you're trying to auction off art, you have the auction house who takes a cut of the actual selling price at the end of the day. If you look at music, you basically have the record labels that take their cut as well. The point of DeFi and decentralized finance and this whole space is that everyone is their own asset slash business slash company, and so everything is pretty much one-to-one in a perfect world. The counter argument is that if you can create infinity digital assets, then what's stopping anyone from creating infinity NFTs? And so it comes back to the crux of demand and supply, aka what gives something value. When you look at a Picasso, or aka a one-of-a-kind type of item, then there is value because the supply is just one, and demand could be zero, it could be infinity. On the flip side, if you try to tokenize something that isn't really hard to make or something that isn't unique, or let's just say that you're drawing some pictures and you just want to sell them, it comes back to our today's model of selling art where folks can make XYZ product, but if there's no demand, there could be a lot of supply for that same artist, and so it is what it is. The overall point being that NFTs is still an early space, and just like in the 2000s with the dot-com bubble and everything, you have domain names that were highly revered as one of the most important things. And as time has progressed, we went from websites to now we have these platforms, for example, social media platforms, one right here like YouTube, and other types of technology within technology. And so this is not to discredit NFTs as a whole, but it's still early and there's a lot more to learn. And there's a lot of utility, but until everyone has that same base knowledge, and then from base knowledge to the next level, it's going to take some time, and that's okay. So with that, we'll get into how to create an NFT as well as sell an NFT. So here we are at OpenSea.io, the largest NFT marketplace. Buy, sell, and discover rare digital items. So assuming you've set up MetaMask, we come back to OpenSea.io. So the first step over here is under create, you got my collections. And so when you press my collections, there was some trial and error that I was playing with, but overall, you're basically opening your own storefront. So under my collections, it's create collections, your own storefronts, upload digital creations, configure your commission, and sell NFTs to your fans all for free. You can also manage smart contracts that you created outside of OpenSea. And so this is over here on OpenSea. And there are other NFT creation tools, for example, Rarible, Mintbase, and Cargo. And so when you press create new collection, for example, if you press logo over here, let's just say that this is my storefront main picture. And let's just call this, for example, my store. And I'll just put this for simplicity and we'll move on. So here we go. I say create. And so now it's been created. So I come over here and basically you can add a new item. So when you press new item, drag and drop file. And so let's just say I'm selling the same picture of my storefront picture. And so this is my picture. And let's say the name is, just for simplicity. And look at this, external link. OpenSea will include a link to this URL on this item's detail page so that users can click to learn more about it. You're welcome to link to your own web page with more details. And so that's basically promoting the fact that you can also bring traffic to your own other location, aka using OpenSea as a funnel. And so you put in a link, description. So just an example, let's say that I put this, it's my YouTube site, and then description, let's just put down this over here. And so you can adjust certain type of properties, levels, and stats. So for example, if I press plus on properties, there's certain examples, for example, character and male for type and name over here. And so these are clickable and you can filter in that same collection for others to actually filter down to find exactly what they want from your collection. And so you can add and press save over here. You can also add multiple more properties. And if you scroll down, you got levels. So when you press over here, you have speed, value, and for example 3 of 5 or 1 of 5 or 1 of 6, etc. And so X that out, and then you have stats, numerical traits that show up as numbers. And so similar over here, but you can add your details over here. And unlockable content. So include unlockable content that can only be revealed by the owner of this item. So for example, if I press this, then basically let's just say, you know, if you purchase this from my collection, then get a free one-on-one with me. And yeah, just an example. So we'll leave it at that. And supply in this case, it's 1. They do mention the number of copies that can be minted, no gas cost to you, quantities above 1 coming soon. And so supply 1 and you press create, for example, and right over there, it's literally been created, this particular item in my collection. But here's where it gets kind of interesting. So when I press sell, this is when we're actually getting into kind of how many ETH do you want to actually price your NFT at, etc. So for example, let's say you have set price, you have highest bid, you have bundle it to sell along with other items, for example. So set price, sell at a fixed or declining price. So let's just say that we want to put a certain amount in. One thing over here is that you can actually choose, is it an ETH, DAI, USDC? And so just an example, let's put 100 ETH just for fun, or let's make it 1,000. And so including your ending price, so you can basically set up some type of settings over here. And so here's where, when I said it's interesting, this is basically what's happening. Press post your listing, basically it's going to try to list it. And this is where MetaMask shows up. And so you do have your gas fee over here. It's free to list on OpenSea, but due to just how the Ethereum network works, basically you're looking at gas fees. Anyhow, I can press reject and we are back over here. And so they do give you some instructions down over here as well when you get to this screen. But basically, if you press that and you list it, then it'll be officially listed.